Well, as she said, my name is Diane Dahlgren, and actually I'm a science teacher in Valparaiso, Indiana. I'm a middle school math and science teacher, and I just finished 30 years of teaching. I've got about 3 more to go, rule of 85 for those of you who know about education. And when you're doing the same occupation and you're kind of doing the same thing, sometimes you just need an outlet. You need something that's you and uniquely you. And my father, the Air Force pilot, he and I had a love for history, especially primitive, prehistoric. And we would always say, wow, I wonder, whenever we would go on vacation, we did a lot of historical things. And he and I, we would always pretend like, wow, wonder what they did with this. And we would come up with little stories and little scenarios to whatever piece of pottery we were shown or this or that. And we loved the whole series, Clan of the Cave Bears series. I fell in love with that series, and of course I'm not near the writer that she is, nor the time for the research that she does. And so I was telling my dad about a story, and he goes, well, you need to write it down, because if you don't write it down, it's going to disappear. So I started writing, and then shortly after I started writing, he was reading it. He's like, oh, that's good, keep going. And then he, unfortunately, passed away. And then I couldn't go back to the book because it was just too raw, it was too fresh. And but then I didn't have anybody to really talk about prehistory with anymore. It wasn't really something my husband was into, or my brothers, or my children, or my mother. It was a thing with my father and I. So I'd already had a bachelor's degree, math and science education. I had a master's degree. I did not need to go back to school for anything, but I did. I asked my husband, can I take a few classes at IUN? I know I'm a Purdue girl, but that's the only place up because I still had to work, I still had children. Can I take a few classes in anthropology at IUN? He goes, yeah, go ahead. And so I actually got an associate's degree in anthropology at Indiana Northwest. And of course, the professors there were 2 main ones. They were like, oh, you can get your, you need to keep going, get your bachelor's, get your master's, get your doctorate. And I go, this is kind of an expensive hobby. I don't really need this. But it helped me kind of come to terms. It gave me that outlet and people to talk to. And I learned even more. Because when I was in undergrad, I didn't have, it's kind of a new science. It's a taboo science because we're studying ourselves. And people don't really like to study the science of ourselves so much. And I learned a lot. And then the anniversary of his death was coming up. It was coming up on 10 years. And I said, you know what, I got to sit down. I got to write that. I got to finish that book. I got to finish this book for Dad. So I did. And it's a fictional story. This is the book. It's a fictional story about a tribe, the Running Water Big Tree tribe. And it's kind of, well, let's see how I phrase this. Everyone, past and present, has a story to tell. The following story is pure fiction told strictly from my imagination. It takes place in a prehistoric time at an unknown location. How did people think? What did they know? What were the rules? And did everyone follow them? When I was kind of in my writing mode through my hiatus, we're talking about a 10-year span here. I highly recommend that you don't spread your writing out in a 10-year time period. So that's what not to do. You need to give yourself a chunk of time, and you need to just hibernate and write. And write it down, because if you don't write it down, it's going to disappear when you do, because nobody lives forever. It's just a morbid truth, but it's the truth. And I thought, I'm going to write it down. If nobody likes it, it's like any work of art. You paint because you enjoyed the painting. If somebody else loves your painting, then they buy it, great. But if not, you enjoyed the experience of painting. I enjoyed the experience of writing. It was a good outlet for me, and I even have an outline for the next book. I've had several people who bought and read the book. My girlfriend, who's a librarian, she loved it, and she doesn't really care much for this genre. And she said, oh, that was really good. You had a bad guy, you had a special needs girl, you had a female hero, you had a male hero. She goes, it was great. And she goes, well, and then you finished it. She goes, well, now aren't you going to write the next one? Because I got to find out what happens next with these people. Kind of, a group of people and you just want to know, well, what's going to happen next with all these people? Kind of like if you watch Downton Abbey, you're like, okay, well, now what's going to happen with these people? So people always, we all have a story. We could all sit here, each one of you could come up here and tell me from as far back as your memory, your own personal story. So everybody has a story to tell. And I had a story in me about these people. And I've had several people ask me, where did you come up with the character ideas? How did you come up with your ideas for your characters or personalities? Are they based on people you know? Well, as Ann had mentioned, I am an Air Force brat, and so I moved. And it was always, hey, are you going to move this summer? Or where are you moving to? So you just left and you never saw your friends again. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have the internet. We just, okay, it was nice knowing you, bye. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go make new friends. I had no trouble with that. But I did in elementary school, I had some imaginary friends who moved with me. And I think some of their personalities are popping up in my characters. I didn't even realize that when I was writing it, but in talking to somebody once, I said, well, you know, I did have some imaginary friends, and those probably would have been their personalities. So it's kind of dorky. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Mary Higgins Clark, she wrote a book. She wrote about her experience as a writer, and I've also read Irma Bombeck and her experience as a writer. And pretty much, what are all writers? They say, write what you know. Write what you know. And so I wrote what I knew and also what I imagined. They also said, look at your bookcase. What do you like to read? And of course, my mother and I love murder mysteries. So I had murder mysteries, but then I also like the genres. I have a variety of genres, but I do like a little mystery. So in my book, there is a murder, but it's not really a mystery so much. It's more you decide as a reader, is it a justified murder? Is it a happy accident? Did it really mean for the murder to happen? And you just kind of leave it. And I've had different opinions from different readers on that, which has been fun for me. I had a girlfriend read it, and she texted me right away with all these questions about certain characters in the book. And she goes, well, when is the next one coming out? I go, I have to take, I've promised myself for the next book I'm going to take time and write it in one sitting. If you have, just like I said, it's artwork. You got a story and you write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. If you like to type, type. If you handwrite, handwrite. Just do it. And then if it ends up becoming a book, great. In this day and age, we have a thing called self-publishing. I have a coworker, another teacher. She has self-published 3 books. I think she's working on her 4th. And she actually, through Amazon Publishing, she got a manager now. A manager who's working with her on her novels and giving her more feedback on characters, which is fantastic. And I would have loved something like that when I wrote my book. When I wrote my book, when I finished it, I just kind of went online, how to publish a book, and kind of looked at some sites and filled out a thing at a site for Ex Libris. They called me up and they said, oh, you know, what's your book about, blah, blah, blah. And so I got it published through Ex Libris Publishing. It's an okay publisher. I wasn't real happy because I was expecting someone to work with me and give me some feedbacks, give me some criticism, help me tweak some of my characters, make the book longer. Pretty much, the more you pay, the more they'll do for you. And that upset me. I said, well, did anybody read my book? I mean, is it any good? So that's why I've had to ask friends. What was really scary was when I hit send, and this book that nobody had seen but my dad, a couple chapters, and me, the whole thing. When I sent it, I felt very exposed, very vulnerable. You feel very naked. It's because it's a private process. If you've done anything with artwork, it's a private process. And then you worry, because you have so much pride and joy in it, what if somebody doesn't like it? But then you realize everybody's not going to like it. You can't please everybody. Some people might like it, some people might not, but you just have to do it, because there's always a story inside of you. It may be your own autobiography. It may be you love historical research and you want to research and you want to write a story. Or it may be where, in my case, historical fiction, but mine's prehistorical fiction. It's going way back there. The cast of characters in my book, because it's prehistoric, they have very unusual names. I literally just made them up by very creative imagination, and I just made up these names, I made up these characters, and to help people, I have, of course, the cast of characters in the front, and of course, there's that other tribe. I have a few visitors from the other tribe that pop up in the book as well. And then when I'm working with this publishing company, they said, okay, for the cover of your book, look at the thumbnails of, the thumbprints of all the pictures we have, and you pick one. I went through all of them. Did not like one of them. I said, oh, that's not my story. That's not my story. And so I said, well, can I send you a picture? And they said, well, if it's pixelated the right way, then yeah. Well, iPhone 5, and there's my picture. That's my house. That's a tree in my front yard. And I was walking the dog, and as he's going to the bathroom, I looked up, and the sky was gray, and I saw the red berries, and I went, oh, I need to take a picture of that. So I ran in the house and snapped a few pictures, and they used one of my shots. So it's just kind of cool. So I'm the photographer. And, and then I said, I want to put a map in there, because as you're reading it, there are certain places that the tribe is talking about and going to. So I drew a little map for you, and they just took I assumed that they would have an artist that would really make it nice. Now, there's my little sketch right there in the book. So, and of course, when I was introduced, I'm Diane Dahlgren. So who's this River Gordon? It's me. I'm River Gordon, and the reason I'm River Gordon is, well, I'm a middle school teacher, and this is a primitive tribe, so they're kind of doing everything, if you know what I mean. And but I'm not graphic. It's not graphic. It's just a lot of implication and innuendo and free love, of course. There's, there were some rules, but then there were some rules that were like, wow, they had some nice rules. And and so I thought, well, I probably shouldn't publish it under my name. And my father's first name was Gordon, and so we tease him because his name was Gordon Carter Smith. He had 3 last names, so I used one of his names for my last name on this. And then river, well, they live by a river. The tribe lives by a river. As I was growing up, I've always had a big association with water, a big connection with water as a competitive swimmer. As a family, we camped and water skied. So I thought, well, that's just a nice name. So River Gordon was just kind of fun because it's a little new agey, and my father's an officer in the Air Force and very structured. It's just kind of, hey, homage to Dad, and then woo, my free side. Okay. Oh, I've talked to other authors. I've gotten to know some other authors. It's one of these, after I wrote it, I talked to people and I was like, wow, I wish I had known that before I started. And the one who's worked through Amazon, another lady I met, she's a teacher. A lot of teachers are writing because you kind of get suppressed. I'm still in the 8th grade. And I got that 8th grade curriculum down pat, and I'm still growing. Our minds are always growing. We always want to learn, so I needed that outlet. And so there's another teacher in another nearby town up there, and she wrote some historical fiction about some girls in the Wisconsin area, and she actually got a good editor and everything. And the American girl was very interested in her books, but they wanted her to narrow it down to one girl, but they were sisters, and she says that would mess up her whole book, and she refused to give in on that, and because she says, well, that's my craft. So she has done that before as well. Are there any questions, comments, anything you want to know, or that I can? Yes.